Okay, it's prepping, it's loading. It seems to be taking a little bit.
Okay, thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Taking a little bit. There we
Sorry,
go.
what was that, Andy?
Sorry, it was.
All right.
I have to mute the live stream because otherwise it will play two of you.
Okay, we're good to go then. Yes.
It's all ready to go, I think.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we are now live streaming on our YouTube channel. So just a reminder that this is a public meeting and everything is a public record in this context. So welcome to the second meeting of our Rulemaking Advisory Committee for Coastal Public Access. And I'm Meg Reed. I'm the Coastal Policy Specialist with the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, and we'll be leading this effort. So thanks all for being here. And Mandy McNabb is here as well. She's our coastal rulemaking coordinator and is providing support for this rulemaking effort. So we are your two main points of contact. We are going to get started and we'll have time for introductions, but I'll do a few housekeeping things first. Just a reminder, some Zoom things that hopefully you're all pretty used to at this point from using all these virtual platforms. Please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And then please turn your video on during introductions and discussion. Today, if you can keep your video on for as long as you're able to, that's much appreciated since most of this meeting will be interactive and discussion based. So that way we can get to know each other a little bit better and see you all when we're speaking. But there's lots of reasons why a camera is difficult for some, so no worries if that's not something you're able to do. When we're getting into our discussion, or if there's questions or things like that, please try and use the raise hand feature because it is a big group. And so we want to just make sure we keep track of everyone. And we also have the chat function. I think it's working better than it did last time. So hopefully you're able to still use the chat to talk to me or to Mandy. And please use that if you have any trouble with technology or if you want to put some thoughts in the chat rather than making them verbally. And then we just talked about renaming yourself in Zoom. So first and last name, and then RAC to indicate that you're a RAC member. Okay, any questions before we dive into the rest of the agenda? Okay, so thank you again for being here. I'm going to turn it over now to our commissioner from the Land Conservation and Development Commission, Commissioner Leanne Thompson, who will give some opening remarks. So go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, isn't this the best? I mean, here we are, we're people who are coasties because we love the ocean, or we love the people who love the ocean. We're committed to doing good public policy together. It's a form of adaptive management in that we're trying to balance and harmonize often, I would say, countervailing tendencies. We want to open the access at the same time that we want to protect and keep from any detrimental impacts the ocean, because it is our heritage, it's our biology, it's our culture, it's everything that matters to us. Thank you for being here today as we work together under the capable leadership of our staff. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna get started with just a brief overview of our agenda for meeting 2, and then we'll do some introductions, and then I'll just give a brief overview of the rule draft. So hopefully you are all able to see the rule draft in the RAC packet that we sent out a week ago, and let it marinate and simmer in your brains and think about some good questions and discussion to talk through today. And then we'll end the meeting with just a few wrap up and reminders for our timeline and next meetings, or next meeting steps, and then adjourn for the day. We have until 4 o'clock. We may get done earlier, depending on how robust of our discussion we have today on the rule draft. So we'll see how that goes, but no later than 4 p.m. And I'll just mention too that we don't have a break built in time-wise into the agenda because it is mostly a discussion on the rule, but we will take a break at some point because it is a long meeting and we want to make sure that people get a chance to step away from the computer. But of course, you're always welcome to do that at any time to take care of your own needs. So please just feel free to do whatever you need to throughout the day. So I'll go around and first, oh, I think there's a hand. Go ahead, Mandy.
There is a phone number, 541-347-2437. I just wanted to rename that person so that we kind of know who's on a call. Can you possibly speak up?
Is anyone on the phone?
I'm not sure who it is. That's why I was wanting to rename it if we know who it is. I'm not sure. I've asked them to unmute, but
Yeah. See if we don't know who it is and maybe remove them and then see if they join again and can rename themselves.
okay.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah. Well, it removed them. Oh, they're trying to get back in.
Yep. Oops. Scrolling through all my slides. Sorry. All right. Well,
Back again. They came back in. Let's see. Phone number 541-347-2437. Can you let us know who's on the phone line so that we can rename you?
I think via phone, they have to press *6 to unmute themselves.
Okay.
thanks, Ellen. Yeah.
Star
*6.
Let's see.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, that's me. This is City Abandoned, Jason Kral, Kral.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
No worries. Thanks for being here. Okay. So then we'll go into introductions and we'll start with DLCD staff. So I've introduced myself and Mandy, so I'll pass it to Lisa.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lisa Phipps. I'm the manager for the Oregon Coastal Management Program and the Ocean and Coastal Services Division for the department.
Thank you. And then Casaria.
Good afternoon, everyone. Casaria Taylor, Senior Rules Coordinator for the department.
Thank you. Matthew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Matthew Hampton. I am the Rules Coordinator for the department.
Great, thank you. All right, I think that's all of us. Anyone that I missed? Okay, then we'll go around with all the RAC members and I'll ask Brees if you can start us off again.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Brees Edwards. I am the Deputy Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, Manager of the Historic Preservation Office for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Once again, thank you for this opportunity and this good work. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Brees. Okay, I'm going to go down through my list. I see Lori next.
I'm Lori Friedman. I live in Bandon and I work with Shoreline Education for Awareness.
Great, thank you. And Adam.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Nielsen. I'm with the City of Tillamook. I'm the project manager and city engineer.
Thank you. Alan.
I'm sorry, did you say Alex or Alan?
Alan, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Too many close ones.
No worries. My name's Alan Hanson. I'm the Policy and Environmental Manager for the Oregon State Marine Board.
Thank you. And then Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Sifford. I'm a coastal resident who lives next to an access in South Tillamook County.
Thank you. Arlene.
Hi, Arlene Merrims with Oregon Fish and Wildlife in the Marine Resources Program. And just to let you know, I have two identities on this call. One is my phone, which I'm using for audio.
Okay, thank you. Brock.
Sorry, it didn't come off. Hey, everyone. Brock Nation. I'm the Policy Director at Oregon Realtors.
Thank you. Charlie.
Hey folks, Charlie Plyben. I'm the Oregon Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation. I also live here on the Central Coast, adjacent to beach access.
Thank you. Don.
Hey, everybody. Not sure if my there's videos coming through. Don Pettit with Oregon DEQ. I work in the emergency response program, and we are heavy users of beach access during the occasional times when we need it. And hopefully don't need it, but we always do.
Thank you. Gail.
Hi, I'm Gail Hendrickson, Community Development Director for Clatsop County.
Thank you. Jason.
Hi, this is Jason Kroll. I'm in the Community Development Department of City of Bandon.
Thank you. Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Sprague, Lincoln City Parks and Recreation Director.
Okay, thank you. Jeff.
Hi, folks. Jeff Mitchum, Community Development Director for City of Bandon, along here with Jason. Good to be here.
Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Iaquinto with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the project leader for the Oregon Coast National Wildlife Refuge Complex.
Thank you. Laurel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laurel Hillman. I work for Oregon Parks and Recreation Department as the Ocean Shore Resource Coordinator. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret Treadwell. I'm the Central Coast Conservation Program Manager for Mackenzie River Trust.
Thank you. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Mertz. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Rockaway Beach.
Thank you. Miranda.
Hi there, I'm Miranda Gray. I'm with OSU Sea Grant Extension, and I'm based in Gold Beach.
Thank you. Scott.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Ferganisi. I'm an urban planner with 3J Consulting, and I do a lot of work with coastal jurisdictions.
Thank you. Wendy.
Good afternoon. Sorry I don't have video today. I am with the City of Brookings and my title is Grant/Project Manager, but I work closely with planning and tourism and everything under the sunny coastal environment of Brookings.
Thank you. I think I missed Erica. Please go ahead.
Hi all, I'm Erica Sears, resident of Tierra del Mar and Deputy Director of the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, did I miss anyone else?
Hi, yes, I joined a little bit late.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Mandy.
Yeah, hi all. I'm Mandy Watson with Oregon Shores. We're a nonprofit that focuses on increasing resilience of the Oregon coast and coastal communities and increasing access to coastal resources. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Thank you all for being here and doing those intros with us so we can try to get to know each other a little bit over these next few weeks. Okay, so we've done intros. I'm going to start with just kind of setting the basis for rule writing because it might not be something you do every day, but there are some like kind of rules and best practices and things like that. As you probably saw if you looked through our video on YouTube about what is a RAC member and the role of a RAC member, it kind of talks a little bit about what is a rule. And a rule is something that implements or prescribes laws and policies. So in Oregon, we have the Oregon Revised Statutes and then the Oregon Administrative Rules. And so what we're doing now is writing in an Oregon Administrative Rule. And I think something that's kind of unique about DLCD and the statewide planning system is that the statewide planning goals are kind of what we like to think of as super rules. So they are rules that have been codified in statute. And then, many of the goals do have implementing rules, not all of them, but many of them do. So that's what we're doing here is writing implementing rules for one piece of our coastal shorelands goal 17. It is a good reminder, maybe because I live in the land use system all the time, but not everyone else does. And so Commissioner Thompson and I were talking about this a little bit before, and just coastal public access is a really broad topic, right? And there's lots of players involved and lots of ways of looking at it. And what we're doing here is things that can be done within the land use system. So there are things that maybe you want to be able to address, but might not be able to be addressed through this rulemaking, if that makes sense. So hopefully the rule draft that you saw helps to kind of put that into context, but just as a reminder, that's where we're living with this rulemaking is within the land use program and what local governments can do through comprehensive planning. There are a lot of best practices and requirements with rulemaking, and I don't want you all to worry about that too much because that's really my job and our department's job. But there are some basics that are important to kind of keep in mind as we go through this. And I have some major bullets here that I'm sure are not that surprising, but just kind of good to keep in mind. So like writing for clarity, we want it to be simple. We want it to be things that are implementable and rule language that people understand. We want to use the active voice versus passive voice. And then the words matter a lot in rulemaking. So remembering what we want to be required versus what can be considered in a rule. So may is something that is a can versus shall or must is mandatory and required language. So thinking about that when we're writing rules. And then never use and/or. That is not good rulemaking and can be very difficult in actual legal land to not be implementable at all. And so there's other ways of getting at that same idea. We did a rulemaking around this kind of idea the last time I was involved in a rulemaking, and we did and for different entities and then said and any combination thereof or something like that. So there are other ways to get at the idea of and/or, but don't ever use it in a rule. So if you want to see a paper about why that's bad, let me know and I'll send it to you and you'll never use it again. Those are some just kind of basics. And another thing that Commissioner Thompson and I just talked about recently was that around this idea of what the rule can do, maybe at the part where we're getting a little bit more solidified in the rule language, we could develop an FAQ or something to go along with the rule about what the rule is not. So what the rule is not trying to do, not trying to regulate, because there are some things that we just can't really do. It's not within our authority. Any questions about that before we move on? All right. So today we're going to talk about the rule draft. Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I apologize. I missed part of the earlier meeting where you probably went over this, and maybe you can point me towards the resources. But can you point me either towards the resources or remind me sort of the rules about who can talk to who outside of these meetings? Is it okay for RAC members to have discussions outside of these meetings as they relate to the rules, et cetera? I think I understand, but I wouldn't mind a refresher, and I don't want to waste time. So if you want to just point me to the resource, that that might be the best thing to do.
Well, thanks, Charlie. No, it's a great question and a good reminder. Yes, no cross talking between RAC members outside of RAC meetings. You can only talk to each other in this setting. So no correspondence outside of this setting. And Casaria, you can correct me if I got any of that wrong.
There really isn't any correction, maybe just a little bit of clarification. When DLCD sends any sort of email correspondence to the RAC, you are always blind copied. That way, there's no possibility of when you hit reply all, inadvertently triggering the public meetings law and bringing a majority of you together for a conversation on this topic. But otherwise, yes, we want to hear from the people that you work with and talk to and have coffee with. Bring that all back here and feed it to the RAC for great rules.
Okay, great. That's helpful. I think given some of us were part of that community advisory team, and there's a lot of discussion leading up to this process, and I just want to make sure where the beginning and end of that conversation is, and if it has to live in this RAC meeting, or if we're allowed to like have any discussions outside. I assume written discussions are a lot different than individual discussions, but
Yeah, if anyone is welcome to provide written public comment throughout this process to us, to DLCD, and we'll share that with everyone here, so that everyone's working off the same information. But like Kasaria said, all of you were selected to represent the interests that you have, right? Whatever that may be. And so we really want you to come to the table with that interest and organization in mind and be representing that in these discussions. And that you will then take it back to your constituencies, whoever that may be, share it with them, and then bring their thoughts back to this table. So that we truly want to have to make sure that these rules are as representative as they can be. Go ahead, Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you. I just want to clarify what I'm hearing from Charlie, because if I'm hearing him right, and I'm thinking about the training that I get repeatedly on violations of public meetings laws, the communication, whether it's spoken or written, still should be brought to this space, not done outside this space. Am I hearing you, Charlie and Casaria? True me up as well. Do I have it accurately, please?
There's definitely some legal nuances there, and I'm not DOJ, so I can't speak to it as eloquently and as legally as they can. Commissioner Thompson, probably more of what you're getting is serial communication training. So, that's you and another commissioner having a conversation, and then that commissioner going and having a conversation with somebody else. And it is because you are decision-making body. The RAC is not a decision-making body. They are advising staff who are then advising the commission to make a decision. So that's where it's a little different for RAC members versus the training that you're getting.
That's exactly what I was kind of getting at, Sarah, and that's the distinction, I think. Like, I could call Erica up after this meeting and be like, hey, Erica, did you hear this right in this meeting? And we could have a little talk. It would be better if we were doing that in front of the rep, but we're not the decision makers here. We're just around an advisory committee. So I think that's the distinction I was looking for.
And I think the only other clarification as far as outside communication goes, if you're talking with any members of the media, just make sure that you're representing yourself and not the department or the RAC. Just make sure that's clear with them.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't want to slow us down here. Carry on, Mayor.
It's all good. It's all good. It's good stuff to keep in mind. So thank you. Okay. So for the rule today, as I mentioned before, hopefully you all had a chance to read it and get some of your thoughts down. The structure is that it starts with a purpose and definitions, as all rules tend to do. Then there's a statement of applicability, and then it goes into kind of some details about the Coastal Public Access Program, which is broken down into like 3 sub pieces, which is inventory, implementing policies, and process. And then there's a section on modifying or replacing, and that is a term that we want to discuss with you all today, public access sites. And then rights of way is the last section. And so we'll talk about each of those. What I want to flag is just kind of we won't spend a lot of time on purpose and definitions in the beginning because really those should be reflective of the whole rule, and that may change over time as we have discussions. So we'll start with the statement of applicability and go from there, and then revisit purpose and definitions at the end to kind of make sure that we didn't add any new terms or take away some terms and things like that. We'll discuss the best phrasing for that word, as I just mentioned, modifying or replacing, to try to get at what we're trying to get at there. We'll try to get through the whole rule today, and we'll go through each section. We'll probably start with some of the comments I made to try to have prompt discussion and thoughts, but it's open for discussion to any thoughts or questions you all have. We're going to try to capture those thoughts in notes through the document. So I'll share the document on the screen and we'll go through it, and I'll make comments along the way to kind of capture what everyone has been saying. We're not seeking consensus, as we've talked about, but we do want to capture all your thoughts. So we want to know where you agree and where you disagree. We're going to try not to get too bogged down in wordsmithing today, but words are important, so we can certainly talk about words and phrasing. I do want to remind you, because we're not seeking consensus, not all comments will find their way into the rule language. So even if you've made some comments, that you might not see it reflected back in the next version of the rule. This is, again, advisory to staff at DLCD, and then we will decide on the rule language and then bring it to our commissioners, and they are ultimately the decision maker here, and they may change some words and things along the way as well. We can talk about the organization of the rule and things that might be missing, things like that. And I just, again, want to remind you of the charge that hopefully you all remember from our last meeting and from the last RAC packet, and the goal 17 implementation requirement 6, which is really those are the terms that we're working under. We can't go outside that container for this rule. And today, because we have a large group and there's a lot that we'll need to get through, Lisa is going to help me facilitate the group today. And she'll help keep us on track and getting through all the different sections as I try to capture all the notes from discussion. And as I said before, we'll take breaks as we need to. So as a reminder, I'll just again throw up the language that we had from the last meeting, which is this is our guiding light for the rulemaking from Goal 17, Coastal Shorelands. That local government, in coordination with the Parks and Recreation Division, shall develop and implement a program to provide increased public access. Existing public ownerships, rights of way, and similar public easements in coastal shorelands which provide access to or along coastal waters shall be retained or replaced if sold, exchanged, or transferred. Rights of way may be vacated to permit redevelopment of shoreland areas, provided public access across the site is retained. So that's where we're living, is in that space. Just as a reminder, the Parks and Recreation Division does refer to the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, which became its own agency in 1990. And this rulemaking is generally about what is within the control of local governments and where those areas overlap and coordinate with other agencies or entities. And before we get into the rule, there is one piece of it that you've probably seen that is really important to it so far, which is primary versus secondary public access points. And I wanted to kind of just give a little bit of context to that because I do think they are important terms for the rule. The primary access point is really about areas that are clearly designated for public use and are maintained by the local jurisdiction or state parks or something like that. And there is some sort of improvement there. It doesn't have to be extensive, but like some sort of indication that this is a clearly demarcated public access point, like a pathway, stairs, signage, parking, bathrooms, things like that. And a secondary access point would be sort of an unimproved public access point that's maybe not super clear. It may not be maintained, it may not be improved, it may just be a footpath down the bank, it may be a road end, those kinds of things. So something that's not really maintained or improved. Those are secondary access points, still very important public access points, but have like a different distinction. Mary, go ahead.
Are like riprap walls with stairs, are those considered primary improved access points?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go for it.
It's mostly because the picture on the left is actually on the refuge. It's on Oregon Islands National Wildlife Refuge. I'm assuming that federal land access points are not covered by this.
No, it would be.
It would be even
Yes.
so if it's managed by a federal entity, the federal entity doesn't need to have a coastal access plan as in the rule, right? That's for local governments.
Yeah, but it would still be an important thing for the local government to point out is a public access within their
Oh.
jurisdiction. Because really we're talking mostly in this case about an inventory of public access sites. So it would still be really important because I think that's like what you're bringing up is exactly something that happens a lot, which is like confusion over whose jurisdiction it is and who is responsible for maintaining that site. And so having that written down in the comprehensive plan can be a really important thing to do. Is like, yeah, we have this wildlife refuge access point and it's owned and managed by the federal agency. And so that even though the jurisdiction doesn't have to worry about it from that point of view, they still want to make that clear. And maybe they have people calling them and saying like, oh, the stairs are broken and why can't you do something about that? And you're like, oh, well, you should contact this person because
I understand that clarification would be great on our end too.
Yeah, so I think that's like definitely, but it's a great point to bring up, Kate. So thank you. I think that's a really, really important point. Charlie, go ahead.
No, Kate's point was great and something I was thinking about, some distinction between federal land and public. But I also was curious because when I heard riprap stairwell, I immediately just started thinking private access. We are talking about public access here.
Right.
Okay, so it would be uncommon for there to be like a permitted riprap stairwell that we're talking about as a primary access point.
Yeah, probably most of the time. So yes, I think you're right. But I do think there are some instances, and actually I think Rockaway Beach might be one of those where there's like a road end between privately owned houses that have riprap. But part of the deal was they had to put stairs in because it was a public access point. And so it's still a public access point, even if the riprap is protecting private property.
I just want to make sure we're still distinguishing public access here and we're not talking about private access.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yes, we're definitely only talking about public access.
Thanks.
Yeah. Reese, go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me. Just to round out the complications, don't forget about tribal ownership of land that may be in trust, which might make it federal, or private in fee status, where state jurisdiction would apply unless there's an alternative understanding of the tribe's rights to access.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And again, it's kind of like why it would be so good to have that all kind of elucidated in an inventory to be clear, like where in this particular case is this, like who is the ownership, who is the manager, maintainer, and then what are the activities that can take place in that space too. Yeah.
Yep.
A good point. Thank you. Great. Thank you all. You can see how we're all already so complicated, right? Okay. Any other thoughts, questions before we move to the rule draft? Okay, I think then I will turn it over. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
Sorry for the late response. So I represent the state's recreational boaters. So I'm not sure where to bring this topic up, but I'm concerned about maintaining access for boaters. So part of the inventory, is that going to include the type of access? And is that address? I mean, am I jumping the gun here? Or should I
Yeah,
hold my
save that
comments till I
thought
get
for
through
where
that?
we talk about that in the rule draft.
Okay.
Yes, a short answer is yes, but please jump in when we get to that section of the rule.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa for a minute while I shift my screens and bring up the rule draft, and she'll talk about how we're gonna facilitate this process.
Sure. So Meg's going to lead us through each section. I'm going to help just facilitate the conversation track where people are, make sure that orders of hand raised get called in the right way. I'd also encourage you to use the chat, especially if you're kind of just thinking things through and being able to write it down. We'll be capturing that as part of the record as well. I just want to reiterate one of the things that Meg said. So we're going to get a lot of comments, and some of them are potentially going to be contradictory. And so just recognizing that not all comments are going to find their way into this draft is important. And we're probably emphasizing this, like most of you are like, duh, but public access is a very passionate issue. It's very personal for people. And so we just want to get that right out front. We just want to help manage expectations, but we'll also be able to tell you why it didn't make it in. And so there are a lot of things that we have to follow that may prevent something from finding its way into the rule, or from a DOJ perspective, things getting reviewed and some liability to the state, which is their job. And then there are some of these will be legal questions, and we'll be having DOJs take the lead for that on us. And that's the Department of Justice. Sorry for the acronym. Brock.
Oh, just a quick note. You had mentioned using the chat. It's currently disabled.
Oh, you
You
can't
should be able
even
to chat to the hosts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
But not to everyone. And that was done purposefully for the same kind of reason that we talked about earlier in the meeting. So if you do use the chat, we will see it and we can verbalize it too to make sure everyone is hearing those things too. Because as Lisa said, there's a lot of people here and not everyone always feels comfortable saying things verbally. So please feel free to use the chat. I'm one of those people who doesn't always feel that way, especially in larger groups. So I recognize that different people have different methods of participation. So you can use the chat and either just send it to me or to Mandy.
Okay. Arlene?
Yeah, just a quick process question. So are you going to go section by section and then ask for input within each section? I mean, I could see this taking much longer than 2 hours, but I know for myself, I have a few comments in different sections. So just wanted to clarify the process for bringing up those comments. Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to try to get through every section. We'll be mindful of the time and move us forward if we're getting too stuck on one particular section. But you're welcome to always send your notes to me as well on the draft rule.
And that applies to everybody. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, everyone. Yeah. Yes. Mandy, go ahead.
I have a comment in chat to me. We provided the ORS that compels creation of this rule? And is the rule new or being revamped? This is from Don Pettit. I believe that the draft rule and stuff was provided in the RAC 2 materials and so forth. Is there anything further with that we should be providing? I'm going to post the link to the materials just in case somebody doesn't have it also in chat.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the ORS is not as like clean as some other ones because, as I said before, the goals are super rules, so they're rules that are codified in statute. So it's goal 17, and I don't remember the OAR off the top of my head, but it is within DLCD's rules, and it's implementation requirement number 6 that I had just had on the screen. That's what is compelling this rule. So that is where, and it's a new rule, brand new rule. So I'll have a new division number, which will probably be 47, but we have to check on that. So hopefully that answered your question, Dawn, but if you have further comments, let us know.
That's it. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, take it away, Meg.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So we'll start with the statement of applicability. So I think I'll just start by saying, like, as you probably have kind of gathered from the reading through the draft rule, it's mostly about creating this coastal public access program, which is something that is described in the goal language. And that is meant to be sort of a comprehensive program, meaning it would be an inventory with maps and also implementing policies and code, and then also a process for continuing to update that. So that's kind of the one of the big main sections, which is the coastal public access program. Then the other, and that is like for the statement of applicability purpose, that is what like number 3 is saying, is that that's if a jurisdiction was voluntarily going to go through this effort to update their coastal public access policies, this was the process they would follow. If, on the other hand, they're just modifying a certain section of their comprehensive plan, like for one specific site that's already been inventoried, then they would follow the other parts of the rule, which is what number 4 is saying. And the first parts is just saying that it's relating to all jurisdictions that have coastal shorelands, so anyone that has a Goal 17 element in their comprehensive plan. And it's not changing the jurisdictional boundaries or responsibilities of any person, any entity, I should say. And then kind of is embarking on what we had talked about last time, which is that we're not trying to mandate that every jurisdiction has to change their comp plans when these rules become effective, because we don't have any money to support that. So that would be untenable. So thoughts, questions about that section? Brock, go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
No. I was on mute. I'm talking to you. Nobody's answering me. Go ahead, Brock.
Sorry. I was just going to say for number 4, does that include when improvements are made? So I know, like, if you have a secondary site that's not necessarily improved, and you're putting in, public facilities, parking, etc., does that fall under 4?
I don't think so. That would be only like through whatever permitting process the local government already has for like actual built improvements. This is more about like the planning designations of the site.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. Great. Brees.
If I'm talking in the wrong place and what I raise should be put elsewhere, please redirect me. But in as much as that this section is also basically saying, these are the contexts that are still going to stand regardless of any change to this. Given that there are a huge number of these access points that go through cultural resources, is there a way of stipulating those the state ORSs for cultural resources in here so that there's a fixed point that everybody can refer back to, that these laws are still in place and that those are standing obligations as well?
Yes, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I'll make a note of that. I'm not sure exactly where it might go, but just kind of reminding about existing regulations. I assume you probably don't know off the top of your head, but what, like, you're talking about kind of like the SHPO kind of things?
ORS 392 something.
Okay.
Cannot damage, alter, destroy
Yeah.
a known archaeological site. Permits are necessary to work in a known archaeological site, and I forget the third one, and then probably also equally applicable are burial laws.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? I don't have anything in the chat directed towards me.
Meg, for
Yeah.
for number sorry, we're under this whole statement of applicability. I didn't think it was clear what my earlier question was, that when there's jurisdiction that doesn't belong to the municipality or local government, that it still should be included. So number 2 talks about, it doesn't change jurisdictional boundaries, but maybe it should be clearer that all public access points, even those not under the jurisdiction of the local government, should need to be listed or need to, fall under this rule.
Thank you, Kate. I'm gonna write that before I forget it, but that's a good point.
Alan?
Yeah, hopefully this complements Bree's comment. But I guess kind of what I'm thinking about is, should there be a requirement in here that before the local jurisdiction repurposes, changes, exchanges, that there's some notice requirements, and so that we can be involved in the planning. So if there's a cultural issue, the tribes are aware of it. If there's a voting issue, OSMB becomes aware of it, and other interested parties that would like to know this beforehand, rather than, oh, by the way, we just shut down your boat ramp and it'll be 3 years before we get a new one up and running.
Yeah, yes, that's a good point. I would say that would be more in that section, and I think we have some stuff in there now about noticing, but if it's not, then that's something to be added. But I'm gonna just put that as a comment here for now so we don't forget it. So noticing requirements for other entities.
Okay.
But let's
Anybody
talk more
else?
about it, because
sorry.
I think,
Sorry, Meg.
oh, sorry, just to add on to what you said, Alan, is I think a question I have at least is like, how much time is that? Like, when in the process? What is the capacity of others to like participate in those kinds of things? What is the actual like land use decision that's happening that those would be attached to? Like those kinds of things. So just questions to think about, but let's wait till we get to that section.
Right, Meg. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, you also have the chat, and this won't be the last time we talk about it, but we're going to move on to the next section.
Yeah. And I think keeping in mind, like I had the question here, but I think it will make more sense to talk about it at that section, is just like, what is the term that we want to use? Is it modifying, replacing, changing? What is the term would be most reflective of what we're having in that section? So just keep that in the back of your mind as we keep going through this. So the next section is about the Coastal Public Access Program. So the first little bit, 1 through 5, is kind of just kind of setting it up and talking a little bit about the process and coordination. So like what we just talked about, Alan, you had brought up, but this is about the entirety of the program. So like if a local government is embarking on inventorying everything, creating some policies and implementing this program, then they have to coordinate at a minimum with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for those sites that are abutting the ocean shore, with the Department of State Lands for those that are along estuaries and coastal lakes, and then with the Department of Fish and Wildlife for all of the sites. There also is an opportunity for others to get involved. So like maybe highlighting federal agencies or others that might be, or the State Marine Board for recreational boating sites or something like that. If there's more specific things that we want to highlight, then let's do that. And then also offering to engage in government-to-government consultation with the tribes is also listed here as well. So yeah, comments on that. Laurel, I see your hand.
I put the ORS citation for the definition of the ocean shore in the chat for you.
Thank you.
And I think there's a typo in B. Just
where?
That are to or along. Or maybe it's just not clear. Public access. It's just confusing wording.
Yeah, that, I mean, that is how it is said in the goal language. So like public access sites to or along. So meaning like
Oh.
things that go to the shoreline and then also visual access. So like trails that kind of go like on a bluff or along a wetland or like, you know, those kinds of things.
Maybe it's just awkward.
It is a bit awkward. Open to suggestions. But if it doesn't need to be explicit too, maybe it doesn't.
Any other, Arlene?
Yes, hello. Yes, I had the same comment, Laurel, and I actually have a suggestion on how to rephrase that, but I didn't realize it was coming straight from goal 17. And I can send that to you, in an email if you don't want to, I know you don't want to wordsmith now. So I was going to just make a general comment about, I'm looking at it by lines. So in line 90, number 3 there. Yeah, I'm just pointing out now that here it says must coordinate with the following entities, being the 3 state agencies, but elsewhere in the document, in the rule, it's more of a suggestion that they might coordinate. And so I just want to point out at this point that this is a requirement at this stage. And then I'll point out when we get to it where it's a little bit inconsistent in the language.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Do anyone, is there anything about like, yeah, well, let me go to you first, Brees, before I ask my question.
No, I was going to say, I have nothing in the chat, but then Brees and Laurel popped their hands up. Would you like to finish your thought before we move to them?
Just like I wanted to ask this question that I had in the chat too, in the margins, like, is there other entities that want to be listed specifically or like any other process kinds of things at this juncture that people wanted to talk about? But Brees, go ahead, and then we can get to that.
Yeah, if I'm not jumping in line in front of Laurel.
No, go ahead.
I was going to suggest a statement in there about reaching out to tribes, and that may be something to cross-check with LCIS. I think that they may have some recommended language that can sit in there so that there's a tendency to just go with the nearest tribe and maybe not all the tribes. So just a pro tip.
Yeah, thank you. Would you say number 5, like that was my intention with number 5 is to get to that, but are you suggesting like locating it in a different spot or like different words?
It's I see it in 5 when it's broken out or separated from 3. I'm just worried that human behavior is what it is. Oh, I've got my next step here and not catch that there's another next step elsewhere.
I see what you're saying. So like kind of like putting it in the same list.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Laurel?
Oh, I'm trying to remember my comment. It was about the wording on A about coastal public access sites that abut the ocean shore. I'm wondering whether everybody is going to understand what that means, and they don't always directly abut the ocean shore. So just, I don't have a great word for that, but we should think on that because often they are close to, and we manage some that aren't directly abutting but provide access to the ocean shore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you have any follow-up, Meg?
No, that makes sense. We can think about what would work.
Okay. Erica?
Yeah, the first question I have is more for me. I don't work in a government agency, so this might be totally obvious to everybody else, but
in 3 where it says the local government must coordinate, does coordinate mean make aware of, ensure that there's compliance with permits? Like, does coordinate, that makes sense to government agencies, I guess what that entails?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I would maybe defer to our local government partners here if they think they know what that would mean or if they want more clarity. Because, I think that you're exactly touching on a really tricky point of rulemaking, right? Which is like, how much detail do you put in versus how much discretion do you give? And I think one of my goals, at least, is to recognize that all jurisdictions are not the same. There's not a one size all fits all approach. But there are some things that are helpful to be in uniformity. So I think that's a really important point of like, what do things mean? And do we think we know what the intention is here? And do we want to spell it out? Or does that like create too many sideboards or, so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that question. For what does coordinate mean?
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was like very obvious to my government partners on the call, and so that was just a question maybe government people can answer. And then the other thing was the question you had about, I think it was under 4, about notice. What does that mean to give time or a notice about changes? And I was just going to say, I know there's like an amount of time. Sometimes like you give them up to 60 days or up to 30 days. I know with us, when we work closely with state parks, summer is like a really busy time, at least for the partners I work with. So even 30 days, 60 days is a lot different in July and August than it is in maybe February and March. And so I think that might be something to consider, not just the length of time, but the season of time that maybe we're giving notice and wanting information back from each other.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I mean, we could go into such detail as like during the summer months, which are blah, 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 we give this much time and, or we could just make it like you have to have a connection with that entity and you just have to prove that you've done that. But the amount of time and how that interacts is up to you to do. So there's different ways of approaching it, and I'm happy to hear from people what their preference would be.
So would any local governments like to jump in on the question about what coordination means to you? Would you like to see a little bit more detail in there, or do you want, be interesting to hear from everybody? Jean.
Hi there. From a city perspective, having worked with permits and other projects with both OPRD, with the county, with DSL, I would prefer not details, although I totally get what Erica's saying. Like, do we want to have more details? Simply because a lot of their processes are so varied and intricate. I don't know if we want to go down that road. So that's just the perspective from a city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
About the timing, I don't really have any opinion on the timing.
Okay. Brock? And then
Yeah, I was just
Brees?
gonna say, good, coordinate seems like it's the right word for this.
Okay. Thank you. Brees?
I agree that it's the right word, but I'm going to, with an asterisk, that because of the nature of government to government relationships that are actually outlined in other ORSs, to the tribes, there may need to be some finessing of what that language looks like in that what was number 5 that got moved up as D, so that where it is government to government consultation, but with between representative government, regardless of local area government, county, all the way up to the state agency, that would be consultation. But that I like the word coordination because that takes it out of my leadership and everybody else's leadership, so that as technical staff, we can engage one-to-one in the problem solving and the applicable solution finding. So I apologize for being in the weeds, but I think that putting both in there in a manner that in some ways puts clear definition that it's an awareness G to G, but problem solving next steps in coordination, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think so. And so if I just for now change that word from engage in government to government consultation to engage in coordination with tribes, would that kind of get at what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because then it takes away that like pressure of the like big G and the time frame of that.
Well, yes, but in all fairness, again, human behavior, I don't want to talk to a tribe because I don't know how to talk to a tribe is a real thing.
Yeah.
And then suddenly lots of decisions get made, lots of actions occur, and nobody's talked to a tribe.
Yeah.
So put a shall in there.
Yeah, I think I had that. Yeah.
Yeah, or
No,
reinforce
we
the
could
shall.
say shall engage in coordination, which I feel like makes it a little stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But then if there's another place where we should add back in that consultation, let me know too. Like, because we just changed that one thing to coordination. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Jean.
I just wanted to back up Bryce from a city perspective. I feel like putting it in both the LCIS and the coordination with tribes under ABCD makes it not such an apparent look for local government to coordinate with just these state agencies. And then on the side, we'll deal with the tribe in a different manner. We want to stop calling that out. They're part of the process. So I like how hopefully, Bryce, I'm seeing what you're saying with that, but they're included in everything that we go through off the checklist as a local government.
If I can, absolutely. And it still exists elsewhere that then if a tribe wants to elevate to a G to G, that option is still there. But let's start at the solution level.
Right. Yeah. Like before you like, yeah, when you're like starting at the ground floor, kind of, so to speak, like with developing it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, ma'am. I've heard raised in other spaces the issue of tribal capacity, and I don't want to load somebody with something that they are unable to actually do. I don't want to be coercive about it and block a process that is otherwise positive.
Yeah, go ahead, Breeze. Yeah.
If I may, absolutely. And I think a little bit of wordsmithing that allows tribes the opt-in, opt-out. And in as much as we're writing in language for today, this is going to be living past that, and each tribe's capacity is growing and developing. And so having something in place for a decade from now means not having to come back to now in many ways. So I, as one of those tribes that it used to only be me that did this, I recognize that what that looks like, but by creating the space so that it's an opt-in, opt-out, allows the tribes to prioritize for themselves without that obligation. And maybe it's a point later or in an implementation sense that puts a time window in this, that no response in X window and life goes forward.
Yeah. I'll also note that since this is essentially a voluntary process. I don't imagine that there's going to be like 20 at one time. It'll probably be like one at a time over years. So I don't think it will be at like this inundation of requests for review on this particular thing. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't anticipate that. Laurel, go ahead.
This is a comment about item 4. Are we there yet? 4?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. It's the language about other relevant state agencies. And this is used a lot in language, and I don't know that it's obvious to local governments what that means necessarily. It's flexible, but it also means that sometimes as one of those, what I would see as relevant state agencies, sometimes doesn't get included in stuff because it's not obvious sometimes. Sometimes it's really obvious, but how does one know what a relevant state agency is? Is there, it wouldn't be in the rule necessarily, but is there some guidance or, where does that, because only a few are called out specifically. But in certain instances, we would need to, we're called out so we could pull in SHPO if we needed, but what about one of the agencies that's not listed, like Marine Board? If there was a boat ramp, it seems like it would be obvious that Marine Board would be engaged, but they're not called out and there's not a list somewhere. So I don't have a great solution, but just being one of the non-clear relevant state agencies and other rules sometimes, it's been problematic in a few instances.
Arlene?
Yeah, I was going to mention similarly, I was thinking of DEQ, particularly if potential new access is along streams or effluent discharge or whatever, there may be a need for DEQ, but if they aren't specifically identified, then there really isn't the requirement. Although, looking at the header of this section, this is just kind of, I guess it's not really prescriptive here. It's more just summarizing what the program is. It seems like the prescriptive aspects of the rule come in the next couple of sections.
Well, it does say shall, but then it doesn't clarify,
True. Yes, you're right. It does say shall. So it is prescriptive. Yeah. So, I don't want to speak for DEQ, but I would just, as Laurel's pointing out, there probably are some other agencies that should be specifically listed, even Dogyami, potentially.
All right. So we haven't heard from a number of people, and that's okay if you don't have anything to add. I don't, you certainly don't have to talk for the sake of talking, but I just want to make sure that anyone who has a thought here has an opportunity to speak up or throw it in the chat. So are there any more comments on this section that Meg just took us through?
I did get a chat from Alan that OSMB
Okay.
would like to be noticed if the location is commonly used for boating access.
Okay.
And that would include an access point that may not be an improved boating facility.
Okay.
Interesting. Can you give an example of that, Alan?
So I think what my thought process is obviously a marina is going to have an improved boat launch. The county is going to recognize that we have involvement, but I think it'd be for our perspective, if we're removing a facility that a lot of like fishing kayaks go off of, they can just, carry their boats down to the waterway. So it may not be an improved access, but if that site's going to be impacted, maybe we could be, notified so that we can, consider that when we're looking at the new site. And maybe we would want to add some sort of facility.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. So then if I'm interpreting your comment, that we would add it as like a list in this list, right? Like the way that the other state agencies are listed, like the Oregon State Marine Board, for
Yeah, and
coastal
only if
public access
applicable,
sites.
because if it's just a, you know, steep stairwell going from a rest area down to the beach, probably not. But, clearly if there's a ton of boats on the beach or it's a boat ramp, then absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
It makes me think of some of the crazy ODFW boat ramps going like down into the Wilson that you take your life into your own hands trying to navigate.
Yeah, the
So
boating
I
slides.
could think of a lot of examples.
Yeah.
Okay. Brock.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's a building on Alan's point. I think it's a good point to differentiate between rule and guidance, right? If it's a shall coordinate, right, that means every time you're doing it. What Alan was mentioning with the as applicable, I think that's more appropriate for a guidance document.
Or like there are some sections, as we'll get to it, as you'll see, there's some things that we list as like considerations beyond what's minimally required.
That was actually going to be my comment on one of the parts of subsection 6. So yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, so we'll get there. But I mean, I guess there's two ways of approaching it. Either the Marine Board can be listed for the program, and like if a local government's developing a program with an inventory of access sites, it might be easiest just to like give the agencies the whole thing so that they can like pick and choose for themselves, like which are the ones that are most applicable to us in this instance. Or we could consider that within the like overarching coordinate with other relevant state agencies, blah, 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 like port districts I'm thinking of too, and other local governments. Like it could be, I think I could see it in either scenario. So if anyone has any thoughts on that one, whether it should be 3 in the list of ABCD or it's covered under 4. And so Alan, maybe I'll let you talk first since that was your agency and your comment.
Well, yeah, I would like the information, and I think, having the inventory and we could identify what's most important to us, but also, so the Marine Board has been historically representing motorized boats, and it hasn't been until the last 5 years or so. I haven't been with the Marine Board, so I can't tell you exactly when, but we're focusing more on non-motorized. And because of the nature of non-motorized, we don't necessarily know where boaters are accessing points or accessing the water. And so it would be beneficial to us. And, if it's an informal boating site, we may not have a lot of consultation or a lot of need for consultation. Maybe it's just letting us know that, we see, there's 100 boats a week that launch at that location. So maybe it's something that, would be beneficial to us to have that notification rather than we're trying to dictate what happens at that location. I mean, I'm not trying to create bureaucracy, but it'd be really helpful information for us. And again, if it's a improved boating facility, then we definitely have more of an interest. But, for the non-motorized unimproved, that's where, it's a good learning experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay. I feel like maybe we should move on. What do you think, Lisa?
Well, yeah, how do you feel about just a 10-minute up down potty break, go get a glass of water, shut your eyes for a second and get off the screen? So we'll come back at 2:20. How about 2:30? 2:27. We'll come back at 2:30.
Thank you. Sounds good.
All right, as folks come back, if you could turn on your camera just so we know we've got most, if not everybody, back in the room, so to speak. These happy smiling faces on a Tuesday afternoon. Okay, Meg, I think we're ready to move into the next part.
Sounds good, thanks. Okay, so the next part is the inventory. So like what is going into this public access program? And just to like preview what's coming next, we'll talk through the inventory and the what should be included in that. And then it will go into implementing policies. So like how do we actionize this program into the comprehensive plan and development code or implementing ordinances of the jurisdiction. And then the last one is the process one about how to keep it up to date over time. Okay, so we'll start with the inventory, which includes a list of information that must be included for each of the sites within a jurisdiction. And then also talking about how to increase public access over time, since the goal language does talk about increasing public access. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And where might that go in the jurisdiction? So any questions, comments, thoughts that people want to start to talk about? Arlene, go ahead.
Arlene, yeah.
Can't hear
You're
you.
on mute if you're talking. Well, we'll move to Brock and come back to you, okay, Arlene? Brock?
Thank you. So back to the comment that we made just before we took the break. I think the second sentence and three subparagraphs under, or yeah, three subparagraphs under paragraph B, um, could probably be guidance.
Hmm.
The just because it's areas that
Can you
maybe
hear
we
me?
can. Oh,
We can now. Yep. We're going to let
Can
Brock
you hear me
finish
now?
and then we'll come back to you, Arlene.
Yeah.
okay, sorry. Um,
Can you say again which one? Can you tell me the line number if you can?
Okay.
oh
Sorry.
yeah, sorry. Lines, I guess 127 through 136, second half of 127. Additional priority areas to consider include but not
Okay.
limited to those. I think that fits with guidance. It's not a requirement that it be there, um, as I understand it with the intent, but could be guidance. Um, and then under subsection E, uh, instead of help alleviate, there's a term that's used later on that's something about avoid, mitigate, or minimize. I think just strengthening that up instead of help alleviate, to minimize or avoid trespassing issues would be beneficial.
No, I'm not seeing where that is. Sorry.
Sorry, that would be lines 143 through 145, specifically 145.
I think mine are off now because of the
Oh,
switches we did, so the line
gotcha.
numbers are not
If you
the
scroll down
same.
just a smidge, there you go. That sub,
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah.
Help alleviate trespassing issues. Okay, and so your comment was to change the wording.
Yeah, there's I lost where it is down here, but later on in the rule, you use a phrase that's like, oh, here it is. It's under 13 sub C, avoided, minimized, or mitigated. Something to that effect, I think would be helpful.
I see Arlene went to her phone, so she wouldn't be able to raise her hand. So Arlene, are you there? Oh, there you are. Yep.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
using my computer audio. It's just a little probably hard for you to hear me. So let me know if you can't hear me.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, I was kind of backing up to line 114, where it says a map or specific site location. I would suggest here you might want to specify GIS map, although that is a bit specific, but just to suggest that, you don't want a very coarse old paper map to try to identify an access site, but you'd probably want it developed in GIS.
I will push back that that is not something all local jurisdictions have the ability to do. So I don't know that that is something that can be done.
Sure. And then also in this section, so I wondered in section B, 6B, this does not include the inventory elements that are in A. So the map, the description of the location, and I wondered if, for a new site, especially new priority areas identified, that you would want to have some of that detailed information, even though it isn't completely, cited yet. You might still want some of that information about the new site. And along with both of those, A and B, I would suggest adding, an element, something about the general habitat features or description of that environment, because if it is located, along a coastal stream or waterway or whatever the habitat is there, we'd probably want, to have that identified up front, and that might help trigger, well, who do we need to contact, certain agencies, or how that coordination would work, just kind of knowing what the basic features are there, habitat features. So whether it's a stream or a dune or, coastal forest, I think that would be helpful to have in the inventory.
Done. And then Kate?
Sorry, it takes me a minute to get off, get the mic and video back on. There it goes. It's more of a question about the inventories. How does that relate to the inventories that DLCD maintains? And then, is there any way to link those two a little bit for jurisdictions that don't have that capability? I'm just wondering if this couldn't prescribe utilizing, they would have an inventory, but they would also update your inventory just so that people stay on the same page on this stuff.
Yeah, it is required that they start with our inventory. That's was 7, now 6 of that section. So it says that they have to start with our decadal database. But you're saying like that there should be another pathway for us to ingest their information and update our inventory, right? Is that what you're saying, Don?
If possible, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we would do that anyway, but we can certainly put that in there.
All right. Kate.
Can you scroll up to like 120, beginning of the section?
Yes.
So it says they talk about primary and secondary access sites, but then type of site, wouldn't like physical access or visual access, wouldn't those be identified under primary and secondary? Or I don't understand how type of site is different from primary, secondary, or important, or if you would want to like list the possible types for that. Like, what does type of site really mean?
Yeah.
If it's just, is it a physical access or a visual access, then maybe that's different than type of site.
Yeah, like that could just be like a yes, no choice kind of thing you're saying. Yeah, if those
Yeah.
are really the only two types.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if there's not something else. Yeah.
Yeah, that probably is true. Like, I think that is at least what I was thinking when writing this, like that distinction, because that can kind of change how the sites are maintained, is like like whether it's just purely a visual access, So yeah, I think you could just change it to be, is it physical or is it visual?
And visual accesses could be a lot of things. Are you sure you want to include visual accesses? Like, I mean, a visual access could be a viewpoint that's really high above. It's there, you're not actually getting to the water body, whether it's a river, lake, or stream, or the ocean.
Yes,
I don't know.
yeah, that is what it's referring to, as like it would limit it because it's only those areas that are in the coastal shorelands of the jurisdiction. And if you look at the definition of coastal shorelands, it's actually it's a small buffer area. So like you wouldn't necessarily go up very high elevation wise necessarily.
Okay.
But it would be just those things that are like directly along, for the most part, a shoreline. So like thinking of like a pathway that kind of like goes along a river or an estuary or something, and that is considered a visual access, but might not ever get you down to the water itself.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm thinking of as like some that are under our jurisdiction that local cities might not think of.
Yeah.
As accesses. Yeah. If they don't get you to the water. Yeah.
Mandy, before I get to you, I did have a comment sent in 6B8. What is the accessibility features hyperlinking to, Meg?
Oh, it's not hyperlinking. It is track changes.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't flag this earlier. It wasn't in the draft that I sent to you all, so I wanted to flag that it's different. And was a comment from one of our staff here, who has that kind of lens on often. And so it's just a change of the text, if that makes sense.
Mandy.
Hi, I'm looking at 6BC, where it says connections with public transportation systems provide coastal access opportunities to the greatest number of people. I know other states mandate affordable overnight accommodations in the coastal zone. I realize that's out of the scope of this rule change, but I'm wondering if we want to say like connections with public transportation systems, like, and local affordable overnight accommodations, just to try to get at the idea that like not everyone has the luxury of living at the coast, and sometimes that includes, needing a place to stay if you can't drive to the coast there and back. So something maybe getting to that idea. That was just kind of my one idea with this section.
Okay. Thank you. Laurel, and then Charlie.
Okay, my comments are about what was line 120 and 121 about emergency access and evacuation. Now, looks like it's 126 and 127. Our staff that were reviewing this were unclear what needed for emergency access means. Does that mean it is currently an emergency access, that it's signed for emergency access, that it provides vehicular access to the site, or what that means?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above.
It just is unclear for us because we have like our own inventory and have information about places that are available for, an ATV to get down or a truck to get down. I think it wouldn't be immediately obvious to somebody what that means necessarily. Are you trying to say it is currently, or that the section of shoreline needs future emergency access, or there's emergency access missing?
I think for this section in particular, it's for things that are existing. For the next part, that would be like for improvements. So if the site is being used as an emergency access point, like could, fit a vehicle down it and that kind of thing.
So maybe we should say that instead of that it's needed for emergency access. And then similar comments about needed for evacuation. So it's unclear what that would mean. Does it mean that it's developed in a way that allows for easy evacuation? It's sort of a more improved access point. Does it provide access to a certain section of shoreline that's otherwise limited, by headlands that limit access at higher tides? So would that criteria only be for like certain sections of shoreline that are critical to provide evacuation? It's just sort of vague as far as what needed for evacuation and needed for emergency access are. So I just flagging those for maybe the group has some great suggestions, but I think it's really important to flag that, but maybe some more clarity on that would be helpful.
Okay. Charlie, then Arlene again.
Yeah, maybe just kind of following up on Laurel's point. I mean, I would argue that every single access point away from the beach is critical in a tsunami evacuation. So I don't believe that it's a yes or no whether the site is. I think it's a qualification of the site's use related to emergency access or evacuation. And I just frankly would just advocate that all of our sites and all of our access points are important for that to some degree. But I think the nature of it might be more, to Laurel's point, helpful. I'm also confused, kind of going back to the question about a GIS, whether or not a site would include the map, I guess, piece of it, and what the visual representation of the site and the inventory is. And maybe some communities don't have GIS capabilities or otherwise, but I see a lot of words, but not a lot of photos. And every time I get into a deed or I'm looking up an access and trying to understand the history, some photographs can pictures worth 1,000 words in many cases. So I'm just wondering where, if that is a requirement that I'm missing, or if that could be an added value here around the map piece.
So you're advocating for the addition of photos to the inventory?
Yeah, I think a photo can give you a lot of information that's in I through VII in the absence of good words to describe those, if that makes sense. I am advocating that it would be nice to have a photo in there, or suggesting it for a conversation of the rack, some visual representation of the site.
Okay.
All right. Arlene, then Brees, then Margaret.
Yeah, so two things. Thanks for bringing that up. Because there are online mapping tools. DLCD has online mapping tools. Even in Google Maps, you can view the satellite imagery and do a screen grab. You can zoom in pretty close and do a screen grab, although you may not get super detail that way. But with I would think DLCD's one of their mapping tools, you would be able to create your own document like or a wind map. Create your own map pretty easily, just to at least show the site in relation to the surrounding area and environment, so we kind of know, everybody knows what that access point looks like and what the resources are around it. So that's just one suggestion there. And then the other, going down to, and I realize that the numbers in the margin have all changed now because you're editing in real time. So my static copy, my numbers don't match. So sorry if I maybe gave you a different number on my last comment. But so at the end of this section, section F, lowercase f, where it talks about description of coastal shoreline areas, public access may not be appropriate in certain areas due to the presence of sensitive species or habitats. So sensitive species are defined in OAR, but we also have species that are listed in our conservation strategy. And those would not qualify, if you're using this case literally or this phrase literally, they don't meet that definition necessarily of sensitive, although they are sensitive, but they're not listed specifically in OAR as sensitive. So I think we want to think about this a little bit more, and I'll speak with some folks internally. We may want to say something like, the presence of sensitive or conservation strategy species, but we have a new term for conservation strategy, so wildlife action plan. So that may just need some refining, if you'd be open to some additional context there. I'm seeing thumbs up.
All right, couple thumbs up. Brees, and then Margaret.
Yeah, actually, Arlene hit several of the points that I was looking to make, but I'll just reiterate them. The first is as an Esri product, the agency is using, there are ways that you could invite that to be updated by remote users in a way that make sure that there is now a central location with all of this information that then the county and local jurisdictions would still be able to access. And with that, in that kind of GIS environment, being able to maintain a conditions archive, as whether it's erosion or pedestrian use and risk liability, quite frankly, because many of these are secondary, somebody cut them in themselves and they've become secondary, but they still have risk factors to them that might be worth considering in here as part of the inventory. And I don't know, I was going to suggest that there is ownership and management in terms of what I took to be jurisdictional authority and responsibility. But then there are specific management specializations. And to Arlene's point, some of these go through restoration areas. They may not have T&E species, but they may have recent investment for restoration and bank stabilization, et cetera, that institutional memory knows about, but with changeover, that may get lost. So having a location that's discoverable, easily discoverable about those conditions, I think benefits all, from the investment side in those restorations as well as the management side. And then, yeah, that's the last that I have here. Thanks.
And then Margaret.
Hi. This isn't like about a specific line, and it definitely ties in with what Brees and Arlene were saying. But as I'm looking at this, what comes to mind for me is like in the inventory, whether it can somehow be documented, whether a particular access point provides access or is near to like a special or unique place, like for Oregon Conservation Strategy wildlife, like harbor seal haul out sites or habitats like tide pools or special plant communities, both in terms of like, does it provide access for people to experience that in some way, and then also when, later on in the strategy, when it's talking about like when an access is being vacated potentially in favor of development, documenting whether that particular access to those resources is lost or improved, like with the lens of both protection and visual access or physical access to those places. And then also whether development would like damage that habitat or disrupt the wildlife use of that place. And I know that maybe I'm getting a little bit beyond the purposes of the rule, but it seems like when we're folding in like also like emergency and restrooms and stuff, thinking about some of those special like niche spots that we have on the coast and how changes impact that, or whether even there's better ways to provide that access, might be helpful in these plans. Does that make sense?
So, like, to put that maybe in the context of where that lives, like there was a space that says like I can't remember it now, but like where public access might not be appropriate because of the things that are present there.
Yeah, but like I'm thinking, what if there's a site where there is public access, but it does provide access to like a Harbor Seal haulout site? Like if you think about Otter Rock, there's a secondary access that's very steep down to the beach there north of Devil's Punch Bowl, and there is a Harbor Seal haulout site, and like just documenting stuff like that.
Okay, so adding to the inventory of sites, like what Arlene had said before, habitat inventory information.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry if I was a little long-winded.
No worries.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah, thank you.
Jean, and then Scott.
Oh, wow, I came up fast, thanks. Right here on this page for accessible signage, accessibility features, that's number 8. And then you had accessible somewhere else just above that. Oh, 5, description of the accessibility features. So I know OPRD is like a lot of us in government right now that's going towards universal design for any kind of beach access or park improvements or land improvements. And under that, we usually use the term inclusivity as well as accessible. And not to go into details with everyone because I know we've got a lot to move on, but there's a difference in both of those, both accessible and inclusive features. The greatest example I've ever heard is someone who has low vision may use an accessible sign that has Braille on it when an inclusive amenity like a sign that has a audio aspect to it can help people that have no vision, that have low vision, that have simply lost their glasses or contacts that day. So I'm just thinking it's important to put in the word inclusive in there too, under universal design.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
I know we've talked about this a lot, but I need to go back to the GIS and the mapping right there, and then what's, inventory for each of the sites. I'm doing a couple comp plan updates now, and the inventories are a big piece of that effort. And this is coming up with a local inventory that's adopted as part of the comprehensive plan for the public access sites. So we did start with the state's database, and the jurisdictions I'm working with are lucky enough to have GIS. Again, as we know, some are not. And this may not even be part of the rulemaking, but is there some way that we could use the statewide inventory where the jurisdictions are required to update that and adopt that, and then so it's constantly updated? Because what happens is that the local inventories tend to get stale, and oftentimes those comp plans aren't updated for 10 plus years, and the data at the state level might actually be up to date more. So I don't know if you could, there's a way to kind of even like refer to the state database as the inventory and be required to update that database as part of this. This is totally thinking out of the box and may not be relevant, but it's just something that came to mind because then everyone would be working with the same data set. And then the second thing that was the pictures. I love the idea of the pictures, but I would not put it under must include because sometimes it just might not be feasible. So I really do like the state inventory though. I think that's that was a big plus for the cities that I'm working with to be able to start with that. And then even sharing that in public meetings and having the public mark spots where it was missed was a really beneficial way to kind of do that database update.
Thank you, Scott.
If I could ask a
go
follow-up,
ahead. Sorry, Meg. Of course.
No worries. Um, I just am thinking through that and like, yes, I think that's like what we intended, right? Is to like start with the state inventory and then do exactly what you said, which is update it with local knowledge. And then there's these other pieces which like our inventory doesn't necessarily include all of this information that's here listed right now that we're discussing. So there is a option that we could like require of ourselves to include this information. But I do think that to some extent, this is like meant to be like flexible for each jurisdiction and include the information that they have. And also like, for example, with evacuation, some jurisdictions have their own tsunami facility evacuation improvement plan. And so they could use that as part of this inventory too, but not all local jurisdictions have that, and some of them use their own method for talking about evacuation versus like what the state says for evacuation. And so like I'm just trying to like think through that like balance of like the specific or like the localized versus the statewide, the coastwide. And so just like, are you thinking like the inventory, a statewide inventory would just be like the requirement and then we build the program from there with like policies or whatever? Or is there still like the option to make it a localized inventory?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I didn't think it through that much, but I was thinking that all these, the site inventory and this list of things that would be included could easily be part of that GIS database.
Right.
Even the picture. So, but yeah, how do you? I haven't thought through the local versus the statewide and how that works, and that was why I was thinking, is it even a possibility for a local jurisdiction to just adopt the statewide inventory after it's been updated as part of the comp plan process? So I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
I haven't thought it through.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Thank you.
Okay. So just a quick time check. We're at 3. We have about 50 minutes left. Meg needs a little bit of time to just wrap up the meeting and talk about next steps. So not trying to squash thought processes, just letting you know. Charlie, then Arlene, then Brees.
Yeah, I think you just had the discussion I was trying to kind of get at with the photographic is like the state versus the local and what is included there. And the more I look at this and the more specificity I think about this, particularly when you were talking about types of sites, I think about types of uses at that site. And so like how deep do we want to go? And we heard about, ecological uses, and we heard about recreational uses with boats. And so um, I think that matters as much as the access itself in some cases, and whether that belongs in the local or the state and to what detail, I'm not sure. But that keeps kind of popping up in my mind as these types of uses and the detail that should be between the two plans.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Charlie, because what I would say too is like, just remember where this is going and where it's going to live is like, it's in a comprehensive plan of a local jurisdiction. And like, that doesn't preclude all of those things from still happening and being, like real true things that are happening, right? But does it have to be in that level of detail in a comprehensive plan? Because like these documents are massive, right? Like they're hundreds of pages long.
100%.
Yeah, like they're
100%.
already like hard to get through, to understand, to use. And so like what I would suggest is like looking at through the lens of like what information is included here that makes a difference to how something could be implemented through the land use program, which I know that's asking a lot because like you're not all land use planners, right? So like I'm asking you to do a big lift there, but like I'm going to try to help, and hopefully our local jurisdiction partners here will help with that too, of like what information means something that then gets carried out later through a policy decision or a permit decision. And like, yeah, maybe that'd be just really nice information to know, but do we need it for implementing something in the land use program? And so like, do we want to force the local governments to go through such an extensive exercise to get to something that doesn't actually really do anything in the long run? So like, that's what I'm just asking everyone to kind of keep in mind with this like level of detail and the effort required to go into that for a local government to do that. And like, what's the bang for your buck, so to speak, at the end of the day?
Yeah, 100%. We have enough in our comprehensive plans that is really hard to track and implement in the first place. It's so big and bulky. So agreed on that. I'm also thinking of it from the, when things change or when certain uses are lost. And what does access mean in that sense of those uses? And I think looking from ecological to cultural uses and otherwise, harvest type uses, you can imagine a range of situations where that would matter.
Thank you.
All right. We have Arlene and then Brees.
Yeah, so just circling back to 6F about the description of sensitive, or whatever we're going to call them, species and habitats. So F is specific about a description of shoreline areas where public access may not be appropriate. And so this assumes that the local government has already made that determination about what areas may not be appropriate. But under A and B, there isn't really that description, like I said earlier, about having a habitat and also a sensitive species description that would fit well there, especially in terms of if a local entity wants to identify new areas for new trails or expanding, new access, how that would affect the local resources there. And so I guess building in that coordination with the appropriate agency, whether it's ODFW or parks or Fish and Wildlife Service, to understand what those resources are, because it may not be evident when they're developing the inventory. So I guess I'm just kind of advocating again for making, the suggestion to have that coordination early on when there is a revamping of the plan, the program, or additional, suggested modifications or new access points that be part of that inventory to assess whether it's a viable proposal, or whether or not some mitigation measures need to be applied, or maybe there's a different, better location.
Thank you, Arlene. Brees, and then I have a comment for you, Meg, after this.
I'll try to be brief. I'm being a person that spends a lot of time in GIS. I think that there's a way, maybe under point 1, a map of specific location, and then breaking that into whether that's a reference to the agency's GIS map, but obviously you'd have to give, access and be on board with that. GIS map, unless otherwise applicable, and that gives people the off-ramp for maybe they use a different type of mapping technology. But if you go that route, would encourage giving a scale, so that we're not seeing small areas made, 50 acres. But then that lets you get into being at that tier 1 data capture, not so that you don't have to get so deep in the weeds, but as the local area government, for their own purposes over time, may develop in that sense. That way we're staying only within what our bandwidth is as the rack. I'm not sure I'm making that.
I'm not sure I totally followed what you.
Basically, we could get into a whole lot of specificity in anticipation of what local area governments could be recording, but going back
For each public access site.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that tier 1 that we're talking about here, if the local area government wants to do more, that's for them to do later in their own system. But that way, there is an avenue to succeed if they can go to the pre-existing state inventory and update their jurisdictional footprint within that larger inventory. And that way they're able to succeed, and it's also equally accessible to discover.
Yes, I see what you're saying, and I think that's a good idea. I think what it will be difficult to do in the realm of what your local jurisdictions can and have the ability to do. But I think that's more of like, that's a DLCD thing that we will need to provide, is like that service to like share the information that local jurisdictions are doing in our own GIS environment where we share that. And that's fine. And we do that anyway. But I don't think the local jurisdictions themselves can really do that in the same way. And one of those reasons being that, like, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit already, but like the static nature of the inventories, which like has pros and cons, but like in our land use program, the inventories have to be static because you have to like have a public process where it's transparent and people know what's happening, and it's going through the adoption process where there's a public hearing and people are notified and things like that. So like you can't just change information without having an adoption process.
Got
And
it.
I think like our map changing all the time they couldn't like reference that as their data source. They have to have their own discrete data
Yeah.
source that they've adopted. Yeah.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Forget half of what I just said.
No. I think it's really important because it's like there's like two sides of the coin. There's like the information that the local government is using in its own land use planning, plus then the information that the public is seeing and making decisions off of and doing all the other things with. So I do think it's a valid point, and yeah, something that we as DLCD should probably do a better job of. So thank you. Yeah. Scott, go ahead. And then I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, we should move on, but Scott, just a quick sec. Back to the conversation about the database and photos. There was just a question about could the state database include photos? And then I'll get to you, Scott.
Yes, and I think it actually does.
I think there are photos in.
Yeah. Whether or not they're accessible on the current platform, I'm not sure, but we do have photos for the inventory. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Scott.
I'll keep it quick. I do have to say, Meg, I appreciate it when you said, trying not to burden the local jurisdictions, because when I first saw this list, I said that is quite a bit of work to look through. I think Seaside has over 50, Manzanita has like almost 40. So going through each one of those point datas and then trying to figure out if it is used for evacuation, if it is emergency access, whether there's environmental constraints, whether there's a habitat, that could be a substantial amount of work. So I'm just throwing that out there as something that we might consider. And maybe instead of saying that the inventory must include the following, maybe it just must include the map of the locations. And then all these other things are great to have, but not musts. Just a thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really good point.
One more from Charlie. Making those photos accessible, the ones currently on the database, would be helpful for both public use and local government. So I think that came out pretty loud and clear. Adam, before Meg starts moving on.
Thank you so much. I was hesitant to talk a little bit because I think of all the jurisdictions represented here, we might be the poorest. We don't have a GIS specialist on staff, and a lot of our critical infrastructure, water and sewer, is not doing well. So when I see a lot of the things that are presented here, to me, it's kind of like a wish list. I wish we could do a lot of these things. I just don't know where we would get the funds or the staff to do it. So I really want to echo what Scott was saying, that some of these things would definitely be a burden on cities like ours. And I was thinking about how to potentially mitigate that. I don't know if there would be a stipulation for population size of the city, or if there's another idea for jurisdictions that are economically disadvantaged, which I think the Tillamook area is. But yeah, I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great point. I will just highlight that all of this is all voluntary. So like none of this program would be required by any jurisdiction if the rule were to pass. It would only be if Tillamook, say, was like doing a comprehensive plan update and wanted to update their goal 17 element of their comprehensive plan, then these things would apply. So yeah, definitely hear you, Adam, that this is like not something that is easily undertaken by local governments on the coast. So I appreciate that. Okay, I think we're going to move on. I'm sorry that we can't get to everything right now, but we will have time at our next meeting to talk through more stuff too. And please also write things in the chat. Brock, I got your note for a suggestion in the chat, and I thought that was great. So just know the chat is being saved, and so I will keep all those things in mind too. But I think we should get on to the implementing policies. So like, okay, like what I was talking about before. Now what? What do you do with this inventory? Does it actually mean anything? In permitting or in the local government world. So the first and foremost is that it has to be part of the comprehensive plan. So we talked about that a lot already, but that this has to get adopted, and that local government shall also adopt implementing policies and ordinances to do this work. And at the moment, we've kind of left that pretty vague and discretionary, and that's sort of on purpose, but we can talk through what that means. There is a little bit of a detail with the other pieces of like balancing the need for public access with negative impacts of that on cultural areas and natural resources, and relying upon the knowledge of our other entities to think about those impacts. Kind of a lot of what Arlene's already talked about. So like that's kind of where it's getting to that. And then going beyond the minimum requirements with additional considerations. And so these things would not be required, but could be additional things that the local jurisdiction could think about and could be part of those implementing policies that are in right now in the number 8 section. So like we actually, as DLCD, and I mentioned this before, but this is where it kind of like comes into play a lot more, is we developed model comprehensive plan policies back when we did this update project a couple of years ago, and they're in that local government handbook that hopefully people have had a chance to review. And so kind of those model policies are like what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these implementing policies and ordinances, is like how like the local government could say all new subdivisions along the ocean front have to have a public access point that goes to the ocean as part of their development plan. But like that might not be appropriate for everyone to do. But it's just saying that you have to adopt something to implement this plan, but we're not going to tell you exactly how you do that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, especially from our local government partners, if you have thoughts on that, because we want you to be able to actually implement all these things. But yeah, happy to hear from lots of people. So Adam, go ahead.
Adam, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
no worries.
All right. Then Brock, and then Arlene.
Yeah, looking at 11, and I was just going to tie it to the point that Adam made. I think that kind of A through D that's there is another one of those things where it might just be better as guidance. Uh, Also, I would take out the words wish to and just leave 11 to say local governments may include additional information that goes beyond the minimum requirements. But same kind of thing, if it's not something that is absolutely necessary, local governments have a lot of planning work on their plates right now, especially around housing. And so the more streamlined we can make this and have kind of I'll use the language that someone else used, the kind of wish list items and guidance, I think would be beneficial.
So I got the guidance, the A through E. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the second part. Which part were you talking about?
Oh, just in reference to a couple of comments that have been made previously
Oh,
about things that currently are in the draft rule, but could or maybe should be in guidance.
Okay, thank you. Arlene?
Okay. Arlene, then Brees, then Margaret.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this, I think, and my first impression with the heading, implementing policies, and then reading these 8, 9, 10, 11, well, we'll see 8, 9, 10, and 11, they seemed more like, I don't know, program elements or guidance, especially with terms like may. The local government may do this and may do that. So it didn't really read as an implementing policy. So I thought that was a little bit of a disconnect there. But then focusing on the original number 10, which is now, I don't know what it is now, but I'm looking at a static copy. Number 10 was Coastal Public Access Program should consider and balance the need. That one.
Mm-hmm.
It's number 9 now. So here is where I see kind of inconsistency with it saying here that the local government may rely upon the resources and knowledge of tribes and agencies to avoid potential impacts of cultural and natural resources. And in this situation, I would again suggest the language be replacing may rely upon with should consult with, so that it's consistent with 3B. And that's, I think kind of the point there.
Okay.
So that's all I had for this section. I have comments in the next section. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Arlene. Brees, then Margaret.
Yeah, I'm going to stack on Arlene's point. Definitely think in point that's now 9, the may rely on, given the government to government relationship, there should be just a full acceptance of what the tribe has to say, and there's some ORSs that support that as well, particularly when it comes to cultural resource issues. And with the new Goal 5 revision, there might be some modification in this that will help bring greater alignment to that Goal 5 cultural resource issue. That, as this puts it, it's an option. The new Goal 5 language makes it much more, it's not really an option. So, and if this helps actually demonstrate that it doesn't need to be overly burdensome. So that point of changing that wording to consult, will consult, or shall consult, or local governments shall rely on the resources and knowledge of tribes, and may rely on state and federal agencies. But, what that's, I'm holding up a, tribe consideration here. The other elements then become the first sentence basically sets it up so that it's okay to destroy those cultural resources. And I think those reference to earlier before the break conversation about the pre-existing ORSs that protect cultural resources. This creates an imbalance with what's already out there in statute to not destroy. So I just think a little wordsmithing in this can get the point across while reinforcing what already pre-exists.
Yeah, it seems like it should probably be like multiple lines and not the same, to like get at those points. Because I do like I think those are really good points, Brees, about the tribal ones and the things that in Goal 5 rulemaking and all the things that are already existing, right? That like they can't not do. So yeah, that's a really good point. Versus like the agencies, because like I would say that who's to say that those agencies are actually going to respond and have the capacity to to talk about these things and actually have mitigation measures in mind and like all that kind of stuff, or respond at all, or have information for that specific place. Because like maybe like Dune City doesn't have any data on any statewide data on their dune formations or whatever. Like I'm just making that up, but like I'm just like pointing out that there are gaps in knowledge and there's gaps in capacity, and we don't want something to stop moving forward because of those things. And I think that's probably more true for like the agencies than with like the specific cultural areas rules and regulations. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, just let's split them out and talk about them differently.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Margaret.
Hi. My comment is also about that same sentence. So I was wondering if the local governments might also be allowed to like rely upon environmental organizations like land trusts or watershed councils, or scientists and academics like Institute for Applied Ecology or Save Oregon Dunes, since you just mentioned dunes. Yeah, if that could be allowed as well.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, Margaret, that why like we chose may and not shall, because like there is lots of other information out there, and the local governments themselves might have really great resources, like people who retired and now and they knew everything about, you know, like dune ecology, and they'd love to participate and tell and talk about these different things. So I don't think it should be limited to state and federal agencies as the only experts on these things. Like there are other, recognizing that there are a lot of other resources that people can look to. And I think this would give them enough discretion to do that, but we could add more verbiage to around that too.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. All right. And then Arlene, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think it's important to be clarified this particular point though, because I think what you're saying is you don't want to limit who the local government consults with on, you know, expertise around natural resources, let's say. I totally agree with the tribal resource comment and keeping that kind of as a separate line item, cultural resources. But I think what we don't want to suggest here is that it's optional to consult with the state or federal resource agencies regarding natural resources, but we don't want to discourage from, you know, getting your information elsewhere too, but we don't want to imply that you don't need to consult. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's already there. So like we have that already at the very beginning, that like they have to consult with ODFW, with OPRD, with DSL when they're doing these plans. So that's already there. And this is
But
just saying that when you're talking about specifically natural resources, you can rely upon their expertise. But I just want to point out again that like there's not an ODFW person in the habitat role in every jurisdiction. And like there's just I have seen that be a barrier to lots of things in the past, where like a lack of capacity has made that not happen. And so I just think that a must is a really big deal. And so in this particular case, I mean that's how I feel, is that it should be a may, but I hear what you're saying, that you would like it to be a must.
Yeah, I mean, our district bios should be able to offer input on the resources within or in our, you know, wildlife habitat program. So yeah, I mean, because this is coming under the implementing policies section, it kind of seems like this is where the meat is of what the requirement is, right? These are the implementing policies.
Miranda?
And then we have Miranda and Mandy.
All right, was I up next?
Yes, Miranda.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that somewhere I think in this section should be some considerations around public safety. And I think just as a placeholder, maybe under section 10A, natural hazards and their impact and potential future impact on coastal public access sites and public safety.
Thank you. And then Mandy.
Hi, thanks. I was just thinking somewhere in this section in 10 or the old 11, if we could kind of encapsulate not just natural hazards, but the impacts of like shoreline armoring and like the cumulative impact of shoreline armoring, and their impact on coastal public access sites. I think that'd be important to include here.
Arlene, did you have something else or is that a legacy hand? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to page 6.
Thank you. So this is the process part. So like we've talked about this, I think a little bit already, but like finding a way to keep the plan updated. And this is really, really challenging for local government. So I just want to flag that that is a real challenge because of the lack of funding and capacity. But that using our update as a potential timeline is one way to do it. So every 10 years, at least reviewing the inventory and updating the sites. And that when you're adding a new site, you have to go through the post-acknowledgement plan amendment process, and then add those sites with the information that was listed above, and providing notification, and potentially mitigation measures. Then there's parts on vacations of sites that they shall not vacate sites that are needed for emergency access unless a replacement site is identified, and then making sure that public access sites are not blocked or hidden or disguised to prevent the public from using the site. So there's a couple different pieces to that one. All right, I see Laurel hand up.
Yep.
I can't figure out what line it is. It was 190. It's the part about the notification, and we talked about this before about the sentence about relevant tribes and state and federal agencies needing
198, it looks like, maybe.
Yeah, 198.
Yeah, now it's 198.
Okay.
So we had this conversation about clarity regarding what relevant means, but also it talks about necessary easements or ownership or private property access agreements. It doesn't mention if these are new access points and if they touch the ocean shore, they would require an ocean shore alteration permit. But I don't know if that's the right place to mention that. It doesn't talk about permits. And we would be having coordination on the program, but I don't know how that would then be triggered if there was a new access. I'd just wondering about other relevant permits that are needed for if this is truly a new access that's being developed, that there might be additional considerations and potentially for improvements of an existing access if there were changes or modifications or replacements for an access. Could potentially require a permit if it intersects the ocean shore. And then I had a comment about the 14 related to the emergency access, and it's that same concern that I flagged earlier about that it's needed for emergency access. We might need some more clarity on that because, that's really important. If there is a emergency access that is providing access to a specific section of shoreline, that if that were removed, that would be a different thing than if there were multiple emergency accesses providing access to a certain section of shoreline. Because there are sections that have like one emergency access and there's no other viable way to get emergency vehicles down, for example.
Yeah.
So there's the language about like the general area, but that doesn't necessarily help with that issue of that specific section of shoreline that might be limited in a way that would be really a problem for accessibility for vehicles of a certain size. Some accesses you only can get a pedestrian down, some you can get an ATV down, some you can get a truck down, some you could get large equipment down, but because that sentence general area could be problematic.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know how to fix it, but yeah, definitely is problematic.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Laura. Arlene.
Yeah, hi again. So again, here on your line where she just was, where is that now? 198, section B, or C. So this is for notification to the relevant agencies, tribes and agencies. And again, I think this needs to be coordination, not notification, because we're hoping to encourage that early coordination. And if all these sections are just kind of an after the fact, sort of passive approach, then I don't know that we would really be coordinating the way we would like to be. So I would just suggest that the notification phrase is changed to coordination.
Okay.
And then the other comment in this same section here, where it says to ensure that any negative impacts from public access are avoided, minimized, or mitigated. I would change that phrasing to replace any negative impacts with potential either negative or adverse impacts. It's just kind of important phrasing because you may not be able to determine, yeah, the actual impact. It may be potential impact. So. And again, that would only occur with that coordination. It may not occur without that coordination if it was only notification.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Charlie's stepping off for another meeting, just so you know, Meg. And then Brees and Adam.
Yeah, I had similar problems or concerns with this phrasing, beginning with the word mitigation measures and then mitigated. They are in the same sentence. It introduces some confusion. If we were to look at this as a process issue, which is what it is, if you discover that an access point is a proposed access point may impact a known resource, then you can be planful and you can look at alternatives. You can look at what the scale of impact might be. That's an anticipatory action. Then there is the access point is pre-existing, and we know that it is having adverse impacts to a known cultural resource. So I suggest that this be broken into two parts, considering it as a future unknown process, and then a after the fact impact, if you will. That allows everybody that works in that sphere, SHPO and tribes and others, to fully step in to a pre-existing set of processes, which doesn't slow down anything. And then that way, in that anticipatory sense, it's about, hey, can we avoid a site that we have pre-identified before putting in access alignment? And then what does minimization of impact look like? And then mitigation is generally not just the how do I stabilize this, but what is the add-on corrective action to the damage to the site? And then there's the, we already know the damage has been done to the site. How do we stabilize and protect that now? And what do we do to make a corrective action in education or protections, et cetera?
Thank you. And then Adam.
Thank you. My question was about lines 206 through 208, talking about the paths not being blocked. I definitely agree with this section, but my question is more on the reality of what we're experiencing on the ground, which is homeless encampments, homeless tents being put up in the pathways that go to some of these sites. Is the municipality, the city, going to be held liable from this provision if these access paths are blocked?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can certainly try to find out.
Or if there's a way that we could limit our liability for situations like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Meg, you want to move on? We've got about 10 minutes if you want to see what you can get out of the next section.
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll probably won't get through it, but we can finish these discussions at our next meeting. But we can at least start talking about this section, which is this is again, it's kind of like split your mind now. Like we're done with the public access program, which is a voluntary thing that the local governments could do on their own. This is something that would apply in any kind of situation where an existing access and an existing, meaning in the comprehensive plan, it has been identified and inventoried as a public access point by the local government, is now being modified in some way. And so we did get some feedback that modifying was a confusing term because it feels like it's like the physical nature of the site is being modified, which is not what I mean. It means like from the planning side of things, it's being modified, like it is now being replaced by another site, or part of a right of way is being vacated, like those kinds of modifications, not necessarily a physical alteration to the site. So that's just something to keep in mind. And so like thinking about what would be a right way of phrasing that. And really, this is again kind of getting to the heart of goal 17 and the existing requirements and just putting a little bit more detail onto what's already required. So like if a local government is replacing a site, if they're transferring ownership or vacating a right of way or taking a public easement away, that they have to provide public access somewhere else within their jurisdiction, which again is already required. But like, what does that mean? What does replacement look like? And so how can they kind of justify in findings what that replacement kind of looks like? And we tried to put a little bit of detail onto it of like, you could use a secondary access site to now become a primary access site. But what I think is the challenge is like, what has to be done when? Because, if you're taking in an unimproved trail and you want to get it into a primary access site, that means you might need to put in an actual physical trail, like an improvement of some kind, or a bathroom or a parking lot or some signage or something, which might be impossible to do at that time. But it could be done over a period of time. So like what could be a good like way to make sure that happens over time and give the local jurisdiction some breathing room because they might not have the funds to do it right now. So those are kind of some of the thoughts that were put into this. But yeah, welcome your thoughts. Let's get as far as we can in the next 5-6 minutes, and then we'll keep working on it next time.
Okay. Laurel?
I have comments that are similar to the ones I had before. On 3B, for example, it talks about as close as possible to the existing site. especially with those accesses that are providing like emergency access, or they're the only public egress from the beach. I think it might be important to at least consider providing access to the same section of shoreline if there was a site that only had one access. That was the only public access to a section of shoreline. It becomes super important for public safety. And then in that
How would you say
same,
like a section of shoreline would be defined?
that, yeah, might need to be defined. But right now it just says as close as possible to the existing site, which is not necessarily going to provide access to that same, have public access in that same portion of shoreline. So you could hypothetically remove an access, and then there would be no public access for, you know, an area between two headlands or something.
Mhm.
I'm just flagging it. I don't have the perfect solution, but
Yeah.
I could see
Yeah,
it.
I think it is really challenging because it depends on the jurisdiction, right? Like it could be a place that has like a ton of road ends or like, you know, lots of access opportunities, and that versus like a place that like is super high up on the bluff and like there's barely any access to begin with, and the like physicality of the location just doesn't even allow for public access in a safe way. And so I think, yeah, that's the challenge of like, you could say like within a half mile, but like that's like that would probably be impossible to actually do in real life. So I think, yeah, what are the parameters is really, really challenging.
But along those same lines, CI or 3CI talks about, you know, if you use a secondary access to upgrade to a primary access, there's a possibility that the secondary access doesn't provide access to a section of shoreline that previously had emergency access as part of the benefits of having that site. So just saying you're going to replace it with another access is not like, it's not apples to apples necessarily. So consideration of those, especially those emergency and evacuation needs for public safety. And it's sort of very similar to that. 3CI talks about, and I understand the reason you talk about a plan for development because of the things you described earlier, but having a plan doesn't necessarily mean that there will be resources to be able to do it. So if you're taking out a hypothetical only emergency access for a section of shoreline and then you have a plan to replace it, how long is that going to be before that happens? Mostly just flagging that as a concern.
Thank you. And then we have Reese.
Yeah, as I read through this section, I may have missed it. What I didn't see is identification of loss by natural erosional processes. And not that it's about whose responsibility is it at that point, but it does beg the question, you know, here is a loss. Everything here is about making choices. People define choices of not this, now this. But what happens when it comes from that choice or that responsibility comes from unforeseen sources? You know, the king tides come in and take away or, you know, undercut the stairs. That's not by choice. So I'm suggesting that I saw it as a gap. And those would have been inventoried presumably prior to the loss. So just, you know, how does that balancing, which I took from is the overall intent of this section, is to maintain a balance. If you take one out, you put one in.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Don just raised his hand. We're at the 10-minute mark. Don, I think you're going to be the wrap up here in terms of comments.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of pressure. I was just thinking I like the way that discussion is going. It seems if you're going to propose a new access point to replace an existing one, it it should look at its future, viability more intently. So that kind of brings in the Dogami question, um, possibly even engineering, but a lot of the hazard work I think could integrate into that requirement.
Can you, sorry, say that which requirement? The plan?
They're required to identify a new point. Those new proposed replacements, should have a reasonable likelihood of surviving and being as useful as the old one at the very least, but hopefully, lasting well into the future, knowing what we know about erosion, migration of sand, beach sand loss generally. We're going to lose, uh, I mean, it's estimated 50% of our beaches could be lost in the next 50 years. So, um, yeah, that I think you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think the other thing though, just to like flag again, like how specific these jurisdictions are, like in Manzanita, as an example, like they have a sand accretion problem, right? Like they're getting way too much sand and they're like having the exact opposite problem, like where there's so much sand that they're like creating these walls around the public access points and they can't even like maintain those access points anymore because there's just so much sand versus like in Nescoin, there's like no sand, right? Like there's only riprap and sometimes you can't even walk on the beach because of the high tide there or whatever right now. So it just,
yeah, we're definitely making winners and losers. And
yes.
Yeah.
So far, there's only a handful that are getting too much sand, but that actually is also a sign of change, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
providing it's a hazard and it's insurmountable for a lot of the kinds of access we're talking about if it has to be, cleared manually once a week with heavy equipment or something. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're at 3:52. I think this is a good place to stop. Meg, in your wrap up, do you want to give folks sort of not a hard deadline, but a deadline for any comments, as they think about it over the next couple weeks so you can incorporate it into the next draft for people's consideration?
Yes. I think probably the end of January.
Okay.
So the 30th, Friday the 30th. So that I have time to rework the next draft before our next meeting. It is February 17th.
Okay.
Our next meeting, 1 to 4. And that meeting, we will touch on the revised rules. So what will have resulted from our conversations and the input we've gotten so far. And we will also review our impact statements, which are required of rulemaking. So there is a fiscal impact statement, a housing impact statement, and a racial equity statement that are required with all rulemakings. The description of each of those was included in the RAC packet this past time, and I'll include it again in the next one. So take a look at that. We are in the process of hiring a consultant to do these statements for us for all of our rulemakings at DLCD, and including this one. And so it will be a fast turnaround, but we're hoping they can do it for us before that next meeting. There is a possibility because of that you might not get the draft impact statements until like maybe a couple of days before the meeting, and as opposed to a week before, which is what we always try to give you all. However, they're not usually as exciting as the rule language. So I don't know that anyone will have that much heartburn over it, especially for this particular rulemaking. It's not as applicable with like housing stuff, as Brock was saying earlier. We have a lot going on with housing at DLCD, so it's much more impactful in that way. So we will share that, and we will share the revised rules, and then we'll have another discussion like we had today about those revised rules, and this particularly the sections we hadn't gotten to yet. Our next meeting is February 17th. And then we will have a little bit of a break while we finalize the rule draft and get it ready for public comment and our first public hearing with our Land Conservation Development Commission, which will be in April 23rd and 24th. Those, the rest of our Land Conservation Development Committee meetings are going to be in Salem and virtual because we have no travel money anymore. So you can always participate online. And if you want to give comment, you would be welcome to do that. But there is a sign up before that, which I'll share with everyone. And the other one thing I wanted to flag before we close today is that our public comment period is going to close on May 14th. 2026, which is one day after our last rulemaking advisory committee meeting, which will be May 13th. And that is required. We're required to have the public comment period close after all rulemaking advisory committee meetings have occurred. But I do want to flag that because it's possible that we will get public comment on the last day of public comments. That's typical, right? And that means that this body of people will not have been able to discuss those public comments together and decide how people might feel about them and how they might integrate. So that is a job for staff to do, and then present all of that information, the rulemaking advisory committee, the public comments, other things to our commission, and that is ultimately their decision to make that. But we try to be as transparent as possible with all the information we receive. And so I just wanted to flag that because that's something that it's a bumpy part of our timeline, but it is a requirement. So yeah, Brock, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if comments for this you want by Friday the 30th. Would you be able to send out the track change version that you were working on today to the RAC so that we can use that to inform anything that we want to submit in writing?
I can. It might take me a little bit of time. You're welcome to use what you have already. But yeah, I will get you something probably next week.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you can comment not only on what you talked about today, but the remaining sections as well. That'll help facilitate the conversation in February a little bit more. Okay.
Yeah. And the more you can provide alternative language, if that's what you want to see, the better, instead of just like saying, I don't like this. I mean, that's fine. You can say that, and that's up to us to decide what to do with it. But like the more you can be specific, the better, because that just helps, obviously, us get to the real change. And just as a reminder, we have our rulemaking webpage, the Gov delivery, the meeting summaries, meeting packets, and our YouTube as all available resources for you if you wanted to go back to anything or rewatch something. So those are all resources. So we will provide a meeting summary in about a week for the notes of this, which I'll send out the revised rules along with the meeting summary. And then you'll get the meeting packet for the next meeting 1 week before. So I think that's February 10th. Any closing thoughts or questions? Appreciate all your time today. I know it's a lot to get through. Commissioner Thompson, would you like to close us out?
Well, didn't we just deal with finances and engineering and erosion and climate change? And we just got to a lot of the good stuff. The point is, we're dealing with an extremely fluid situation, trying to apply a structure to the dreamscape so that we can deal with reality in a way that leaves us better off and prepares us to deal with the changes that are coming. You're really an inspiring group. Thank you for your good work, your good thoughts. Looking forward to hearing what's next from you.
Thank you so much. I echo that for sure. All right, appreciate all of your time, and we'll see you next time. So take care.
Thanks very much.
Thanks all.